chopped off heads, fake heads and blood.
To me, riffs are fucking timeless.
You've got generations of people going to see them.
It's our best album so far.
The fans have been asking for it. They've been asking for it for years.
I would listen to it over and over and over again today.
It's that music we play, man. You're either going to like it or not.
There are satanic bands. Some of them really aren't.
We're playing the craziest drunken debauchery show we've played probably ever.
He's not in condition to be doing a podcast.
You're listening to the Great Metal Debate Podcast.
Welcome back, Headbangers. It's the Great Metal Debate Podcast, episode 70, May 2021. Thanks so much for listening in. We've got a killer metal debate for you on this one. But before that, we'll dive right into the music, starting off with this one from Burn the Gates, off their 2019 album, Blessed with This Curse. Here's Double Agent. Heard the song Double Agent by Burn the Gates off their album Blessed with This Curse from 2019. Now I'm glad to be joined by my friend Xander. Xander, how are you, sir? Good to hear from you.
I'm doing awesome-tacular, man. It's good to hear from you, too. Hey, one thing that you and I have been talking about for like the past year now is I hear that you're not too fond of the groove metal band known as Lamb of God.
I would have some critiques of Lamb of God. You are correct, sir.
I think that a good way to start this is a little backstory on kind of how I got into the band in the first place. So back in the year 2004, I was 13 years old, and I was just getting into metal music at the time. And the only bands that I really knew then were Metallica, Slipknot, Killswitch Engage, and Shadows Fall. Keep this in mind. I grew up in a Roman Catholic family. My dad was already kind of giving me a lot of shit for listening to Slipknot because he was convinced that they were a fully satanic band and tried to tell me that there was backwards messages in the music. That all amplified whenever my cousin introduced me to this band called Lamb of God, which had just put out their brand new album at the time, Ashes of the Wake. The very first song I ever heard from them was the song called Laid to Rest. And let me tell you, I never heard anything like it before. That opening guitar riff has that signature string bending towards the top of the neck on a low fret. It gave me goosebumps the first time I heard it because I never heard a pitch harmonic like that before. And I just fell in love with Randy Blythe's unique vocal style and Chris Adler's drumming. What other drummer out there constantly hits the cymbals, just abuses them all throughout an entire song? It just goes great with the blast beats. Everything just seemed to flow, and it was something that was catchy, and it was easy to get stuck in your head. Now, going back to the whole me growing up in a Roman Catholic family thing, and my dad pretty much instantly condemning the band for them being a screaming heavy metal band that named themselves after the Son of God, that he just thought was sacrilege and blasphemous and everything. That caused a little bit of conflict between my dad and I, to be honest. He and I got into a couple of shouting matches over it. It was a mess, really. It got to that point where I had to start saving up my allowance money that I was getting when I was a teenager, you know. And at the time, it was only like $5 a week, so it would take like a whole month before I could go buy a CD. And I had to buy a Lamb of God CD and then sneak it home and then find a hiding place for that CD that was away from my other small collection of CDs I had at the time.
If I had bought that CD, I would have hidden it too in shame.
Oh, man. No. See, I think that you're someone who just doesn't understand, like, just how great the music is, especially for their second, third, fourth, and fifth album. They really were at their peak at that point, I believe. They were touring around my town at the time, and I had to sneak out to see them live in concert, and I told my dad that I was going night fishing with one of my buddies. At the time, Guar was opening up for Lamb of God, so I got to see Guar with their original vocalist, along with seeing Lamb of God at their peak live for the first time.
So I have several thoughts. First thing is, I converted to Roman Catholicism like 15 years ago, but part of that was for the black metal. Like, if you go to Catholic Mass, it's kind of like a black metal show, except it's all about goodness and light instead of the darkness. But if you kind of squint your eyes, you can make it real evil. But, dude, I must say, your story makes a lot of sense to me. If you grew up listening to nu metal, which is not metal, like Slipknot, and then Metallica, which is grunge, not metal, then I can understand why Lamb of God might be a step up from those abysmal offerings. So I can somewhat understand, where you're coming from. But man, in my opinion, talking Lamb of God, there may be no better exemplar of what is wrong with so-called American metal. You got this blend of, you named it groove metal, but I will say there's more than that. There's some death-ish elements. There's some thrash. There's some metalcore. Some might call this mixture like refreshing and creative, but I just call it confused and unfocused and bad. In anticipation of this episode, I've been listening to a lot of Lamb of God, many minutes and hours I can't ever get back. And dude, you say they're catchy, but to me there's just nothing inspiring there. There's nothing new or artistic. I don't see what the appeal is unless you're stepping up from the dregs of music, which would be Slipknot and, God forbid, Metallica.
First of all, I've never heard someone refer to Metallica as grunge before. I've always known them to be in the same league as bands like Overkill and Megadeth, which are labeled as thrash metal, but I can see why somebody would try to label them as something different because they are very mainstream compared to the other two. Here's the other thing about Lamb of God. The vocalist, Randy Bly, he has said in interviews before that he personally is not a metalhead. In fact, he's a punk rocker.
Dude, that doesn't surprise me in the least. You can hear it in the music that they aren't into metal.
I think that the rest of the band is into metal, just maybe not so much Randy Bly. But as for the other musicians in the band, no, they're definitely metalheads. At least I personally think so. I haven't heard what their musical taste is outside of the genre, but
I will give you this. Adler is a good drummer. I don't feel like their songs are very well composed. I think they're poorly composed. But given those restrictions, I think he does as good a job as he can. If there is a highlight that can be pulled from the albatross that is their music, it is his performance.
I was just talking about Megadeth, and did you know that Chris Adler is now in Megadeth? That he's the new drummer for Megadeth?
I did not know that, no.
He's been Megadeth's drummer since 2015. He was the drummer on the Dystopia album. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and critique Lamb of God myself, and this is coming from a fan. I didn't really think that their newest album, their self-titled that came out last year, I didn't think it was that great. I mean, it wasn't that bad, but you could definitely tell that Chris Adler was missing. Now, Art Cruz, who was originally the drummer for Winds of Plague, that deathcore band, he's actually doing a pretty good job filling Adler's shoes, but at the same time, it's just lacking the cymbals. It needs more cymbals. And not only that, but I feel like Wiley Adler, the guitarist, I feel like he's running out of guitar riffs now. I feel like the guitar riffs on the newest album weren't as catchy as previous work, but at least it'll never be as bad as their very first album called New American Gospel. Everybody recorded that whole album in 1 week, and not only that, but apparently Randy waited until the very last day to record every single one of his vocals for each song. It's kind of embarrassing, really, but at the same time, those songs are much better played live. Evidence from the Philadelphia DVD that they put out. But I think that everything else they've ever put out is top tier as far as groove metal goes. And you said that you couldn't think of a worse example of groove metal. I mean,
what I said was that they're the best example of what's wrong with American metal. I actually want to talk more about that, but before that, let's take a quick break. We've got another metal track coming to you. This is Into Chaos with their song Wrong Constellations off the 2017 album A Door of Ash and Alder.
In dust no one has ever touched. There are skies beneath which men have never walked. When I search for constellations, all the stars were wrong. You wanted something no other eyes have seen. I only wanted you. You glimpsed the world no map could ever reach. And you meant more than worlds to me. With a surface still as stone, I held my hand above the water, scared to trouble them. There is a fortress crumbling back into the shore. We searched for entrance, but the doors had sunk below the earth.
You wanted something
no other eyes have seen.
I only wanted you. You glimpsed the world
no map could ever reach.
But you meant more than worlds to me.
Wondered how to bring us home
against your wishes.
That was Arizona metal crew Into Chaos with the track Wrong Constellations from their album A Door of Ash and Alder, released independently in 2017. You know, Xander, that point about them, and I can't understate this, they are so American metal. That's not a positive. That's not a good thing. When I hear Lamb of God, over the past few weeks, I've been listening to them, all their albums, all the god-awful songs. The worst thing is knowing that brand of stylistically scattershot, simple music, that it's inspired all these clones. You know, like every single mid-sized city in America has some terrible band that thinks either Lamb of God or Pantera that, oh, that's what metal is, man, and they try to emulate it. Most of those idiots have no clue what real metal is. Xander, I bet they couldn't find Sweden on a map if you put a gun to their head.
Well, I listen to music from all over the world. And, of course, I don't just listen to groove metal. In fact, I barely listen to groove metal. I can't think the last time I listened to something like Fear Factory or Chimera or, hell, even Pantera. You should know that I am way more of a melodic death metal kind of guy. And as what you're saying about Sweden, yeah, I love just about everything that's ever come out of Sweden, as far as music, and same with Finland and Germany and all these other places where great melody death comes from.
And Xander, I'll give you an anecdote. This has been 3 or 4 years ago. I was in Nashville to see a good band, and there was another band on the bill, nice guys, but, man, they were this sort of, I'm sure one of them had a Lamb of God shirt on. They were playing this crappy American groove metal, not well done. Struck up a conversation with one of them afterwards, and he looked at my shirt, and he's like, what's that? I've never heard of that band. It was Dark Tranquility. He'd never heard of Dark Tranquility. Like, where the fuck have these people been? What? I mean, they're wasting their lives listening to this Lamb of God crap.
Well, I wouldn't really say that it's them wasting their lives. In fact, I wouldn't even go as far as to say that it's a guilty pleasure. I think that Lamb of God fits at big metal festivals like, well, maybe not so much Warped Tour, but Mayhem Fest back when that existed. I'm trying to think of other huge festivals that would have played. See, you have your big mainstream bands, and just because they're mainstream, it doesn't always mean that they suck. I know that you and I both prefer underground bands from other countries. In fact, I'm listening to this band that, as far as I know, has never played a live show before, but they put out one album, and it's some raw black metal band called Eos, and that alone should prove that I am not a poser, just because I like Lamb of God.
No, dude.
And
I'm not calling you a poser. That's what makes this so difficult for me to understand. If you were a poser, I would understand it, but you're not. You're a legit metal fan, so I just shake my head at your appreciation of Lamb of God, and I'm like, what am I missing here?
Okay, let me fill you on something else. They were definitely a gateway band for me. As I mentioned before, the only other bands I listened to before them was Slipknot, Metallica, Killswitch Engage, and Shadows Fall. But by the time I got into ninth grade and I discovered things like Amon Amarth, Bloodbath, Cannibal Corpse, Dying Fetus, Blood Red Throne, all those other old school death metal bands, I feel like if I just jumped right into listening to those bands, I wouldn't have liked them. Randy Blythe's vocals warmed me up to the much harsher vocal style. So I honestly have to give him a lot of credit.
It sounds like it would be like somebody feeding someone caviar for the first time. They're not ready for the goodness and majesty of that taste. You have to start them out with something crappy like Spam. They've got to learn, like Lamb of God is like Spam. And you've got to start out with something very simple and not very good, and then work your way up.
I know you're just using that as an analogy, and I'm not trying to be a smartass, but I actually do like Spam. So I guess that sort of makes sense.
We have had some disagreement here, a little dissonance. This is Dissonance by the band Annihilate the Hero from their 2018 album Perpetual Fracture. finished up with the song Dissonance by Annihilate the Hero off their 2018 release Perpetual Fracture. Xander, wrapping up the debate, and again, going a step beyond my particular critique of Lamb of God, when someone says we're an American metal band, the hairs on the back of my neck kind of stand up. It just makes me very concerned. It's like when a band says we're just metal, I fear they're not actually metal. And when someone says they're American metal, it may mean that they've never even heard of bands from Europe, and all they're doing is regurgitating the sound of Pantera.
See, I hear zero hints of Pantera in any of Lamb of God's music. Maybe there might be some chugs here and there that might be reminiscent of, let's say, a song like 5 Minutes Alone or I'm Broken.
And I actually like Pantera. I just don't like the 10,000 terrible bands that followed trying to sound like them.
To be honest, I can't really name too many besides Fear Factory, Gojira,
there are
Chimera,
plenty. There are several in Nashville. I won't name names, but
that's because that's Nashville.
Well, yeah, that's what I mean by every town America. No, maybe not every town America, but for every one very solid American metal band, there's at least one other band that calls himself metal that just doesn't get it.
What if these people were inspired by early 90s stuff like Morbid Angel and Deicide, and but they ended up putting their own twist on it, so much so to where it evolved into a lighter sound that's a little bit more of a crowd pleaser, something like groove metal, and it's something that definitely fills stadiums. It's a moneymaker, whether elitists like us like it or not.
Proudly elitist. I'll get that. I don't have any tattoos, but I'll get that tattooed on my arm, my first one. Elitist metalhead, right here.
Yeah. But again, I know I'm not going to like Lamb of God forever because I can tell they're going back downhill again. And but I'll always appreciate second, third, fourth, and fifth album.
Thank you, Xander, for joining the Metal Debate. And thank you, listener, as well. Remember, you can check out all our content, debate episodes like this one, metal artist interviews, and album reviews by subscribing to us on YouTube, SoundCloud, and iTunes. And you can keep up with everything by following us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Follow us by using the keyword Metal Debate. We've got some killer content coming up, getting back to shows, more interviews, and more metal debates. So until our next podcast, sell your soul for metal and defend it until your dying day.